Hi, my name is Josh Bramlett, and I am the student pastor here at Stonebridge Church, and we have been walking through a series called 6 Weeks to a Better Life, and I have been tasked with the topic of love for our small groups. I think loving people well is one of the most difficult things that we have to do as Christ followers. There's a very common saying among pastor circles that says ministry would be a very easy gig if it wasn't for all the people, right? Obviously, there would be no ministry without people, but that's kind of the sentiment. And I think that at some level, all Christians kind of feel that way, that life would be easier if it wasn't for people and difficult people and people who were hard to get along with, or people that were really hard to love. And so loving people is really an important thing for those of us who call ourselves Christ followers. And I think that this has been, this topic itself, it sets itself apart from some of the other elements and some of the other things that we've talked about in the last few weeks. Because ultimately, being healthier, a very good thing, but it involves me. Being restful and having fun involves me. And having the right frame of mind involves me. And so all those things are incredibly important. But loving others sort of turns the tables around, where we no longer are just looking at ourselves, we're looking at how we interact with other people. Love gets other people involved. There's a very interesting passage in Luke 2, and it says that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and men. And this passage is listed right before Jesus begins his public ministry, as it sort of sets the stage for the ministry that Jesus is going to do. And it says that Jesus began to grow, and it says that he grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with men. And so I like that passage because it really gives an overview of really everything that we've talked about, that Jesus in this passage sort of sets the standard for us, that this is also what we should be doing, that we should be growing in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men. And so the things that we've talked about before kind of covered the gamut of those things, that Jesus grows in wisdom and in stature, and he grows in favor with God and men. And so you see physical growth, you see spiritual growth, but you also see that last phrase is very important, that he grew in favor with men. Now, I don't believe that this means that Jesus sort of went out of his way to please people or to be liked. Obviously, that is not the case, or he would not have been crucified, right? But I think what that does mean is that Jesus' actions, like the love that he showed people, automatically grew his favor with men. And so his attitude towards people, the healing of the sick, the healing of the blind, causing the lame to walk again, these things that Jesus did out of love for his people really reveal to us why he grew in favor with men. When it comes to how we live life and how we live with people, I think there are three things that become very important: love, compassion, and forgiveness. And just if I was to break those three elements down into one sentence apiece, I would probably describe that love is the idea that I am not the most important person. I think Jesus kind of echoes this as he says that there is no greater love than when a man lays his life down for his friends. And so love is this idea that I am not the most important person in the world, that there are other people who are more important as me. I think compassion is the idea that when other people hurt, I hurt. That by seeing other people's pain and seeing how their difficult life circumstances creates this emotion in them, it also creates the same emotion in me. And forgiveness is the idea that the wronged party acknowledges that a wrong has been committed, but then releases it as if it never happened. So I think those three things, love, compassion, and forgiveness, become very, very important in the life of believers. And most of us, if we're honest, we do maybe one of these things well, but not two and definitely not three, right? So we can love people well, we can have compassion, and we can be forgiving. Most of us have one, maybe two of those things down. So maybe you have a very compassionate heart, but you really sometimes fail to put the needs of others above your own. And so when you see hurt, man, it hurts you, but you fail to put into practice actually making other people's needs higher or is equal to your own. For me, in my life, I can tell you that I'm a very good forgiver. That forgiveness is something that I do very naturally. Compassion is not one of them. Ask my wife about this. I'm a quick forgive. When it comes to compassion, that's something that I struggle with. And so all of us, we do some of these things well, but we don't do all of them well. And I think the call of Christ means that we love people as Christ loved us. And so our job is to work on each of these elements, both love, compassion, forgiveness, all the time. There's a passage in Corinthians 3. It says this. It says, "So as those who have been chosen by God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other, whoever has any complaint against anyone. Just as the Lord forgave you, so should you also. Beyond these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity." And I love the wording in this passage because it implies that these are things that we can put on and these are things that we can take off. And so it kind of puts the onus on us that this is something that we have to constantly think about, that putting on these things and these feelings and these love that we feel and that we show people is something that we can do, and it's something that we can't do or won't do. And so I think, but love sort of prompts us to act. Love moves us to a place where we're not sitting idly by, but it actually moves us into action. And I think at the end of the day, it's this that matters the most. So out of anything that we do, loving people well comes down to that is the most important thing. And again, it moves us into action. And so I think the question that it forces us to ask ourselves is how can I love people around me better? How can I serve people around me better? How can I put on a more compassionate eye and see people's hurts and actually feel that hurt as well? How can I actually put people's needs ahead of my own? And how often do I actually do that? Do I forgive quickly? Do I recognize my own sin in terms of how I've wronged God and how I've wronged Christ because of my sin? And do I recognize that? And do I realize that? And do I realize the forgiveness that costs? And does that forgiveness actually cause me to treat those who wrong me differently? Does the fact that God loved me in a very specific way, that He just overflowed in forgiveness and does to this day, does that cause me to forgive others quickly? Does that cause me to forgive others when I'm wronged and I'm wronged intentionally? This is what the Spirit of God does for us when we seek these things and when we do these things. I love this quote by Charles Spurgeon. It says that a good character is the best tombstone, or in a sense, loving people is the best tombstone. He says, for those who loved you and were helped by you will remember you when forget-me-nots have withered. He says, carve your name on hearts, not on marble. And I love that picture. And so I hope this creates some good discussion for you and your small groups as you talk about love and the challenges of loving people, loving difficult people, and showing people what compassion and forgiveness looks like. And we'll see you next week.